Hey bookmarks and bookworms, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm filming the mid-year book freakout tag. I think this is the first one I've done on my channel because I did not do one last year. Last year was my first year on my channel. I didn't quite get still that there are certain things that you have to do on Booktube just as kind of a compulsory thing, and one of those things is the mid-year freakout tag. So without further ado, question one. What is your best read of 2024 so far? This is definitely The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri. We follow a boy called Gogol Ganguly from actually before he was born, when his parents were living in India. We follow them as they move to America. They have Gogol, and we look at their cultural assimilation as Gogol tries desperately to assimilate into American life and culture and kind of reject his parents and his Indian heritage. We see him as he grows up and he gets his first girlfriend, and he very much loves to be with her family. She is from a very white, privileged household, and he loves to spend time over there and talk literature with her father and drink wine with her mum. And they all go away to to their family lake house and just have a wonderful time, really. It's a very slow and intellectual setting to be in. This is a very privileged household. They have a lot of political discussions, and I can see the appeal that Gogol has to integrate into this way of life. Now, as far as spoilers go, I haven't spoken about really any of the plot or plot points because I don't want to give spoilers. This book filled my need for contemporary fiction focusing on one ordinary person's life and these small moments that make up a life. Question number two is the best sequel you've read so far this year. Now, fortunately, this is the one and only sequel that I have actually read. Otherwise, I would not be able to actually answer this question because I don't read books in a series necessarily. Literary books, which is the genre I typically read, do not usually come with multiple installments. And so this is Earth by John Boyne. This is the second in his Elemental Quartet. Each book in this Elemental Quartet are very bleak. They all are playing between the lines of innocent and guilty. Their main character really teeters on that boundary between innocent and guilty until kind of the final moments of each novella, where John Boyne kind of executes, and we learn either way which way they are. In each book so far, it's mainly been the peripheral characters that have been the ones that are truly guilty. In Water, the first instalment of this quartet, it was the main character's husband who had been convicted of child abuse, and in Earth, the second instalment, it was our protagonist's best friend and teammate who had been accused of rape. Each novella is less than 200 pages, but it may as well have been 400 pages each because they are so grim and bleak that they really do affect you whilst you're reading them, and so you can only take these novels or novellas in very, very short bite-sized pieces. So to tell you a little bit more about Water, this was centering on a woman whose husband has been convicted of child abuse on mainland Ireland. She has fled to this tiny island off the coast of Ireland to basically change her name, change her appearance, and try and remove herself from the feeding frenzy in the media that's happening on the mainland. Understandably, she's getting a lot of heat as his wife because how could she not have known? They had two teenage daughters together, one of whom is no longer alive. And so this novella is talking about how could she not have known? Did abuse take place under her roof, and is she really being honest with herself about how consciously or unconsciously she overlooked what was happening, and did she really, if she was really honest with herself, did she know what was happening? And then we have Earth, where we're focused on a guy called Evan, who is a young footballer. He wanted to be an artist. He had a pretty grim upbringing in Ireland, and so he pretty much ran to London and became a male prostitute to get by, and he's now signed to a professional football club where his teammate and friend has been accused of rape, and the trial is currently undergoing during the novella. And so we're hearing about the trial, and we're also hearing about Evan's backstory and what got him to this point. Evan is also involved in this trial because he is accused of having filmed said rape, so being kind of in the room when this is happening. So both guys are on trial, and you don't find out until the very end which way this trial is going to go. So the next installment is called Fire, and that's out in November, and that again is following this very grim storyline of you have a skin graft surgeon, and there is this age-old debate going on of nature versus nurture. When I was reading this blurb, it reminded me so much of the Lucy Letby case, which is, if you are from the UK, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's been pretty major news over in the UK, certainly within the last year, 6 months sort of thing. So I will definitely be reading Fire when it comes out in November, and I think that during that time I'm going to have to plan ahead and pick out some really light, fluffy reads. I'm thinking Barbara Pym with some crochet and crumpets to balance out the really awful vibes of John Boyne. But to be fair, John Boyne can do a novella and a novel. A lot of authors can't transition because novella is a very specific type of skill where you really have to, like gymnastics, it's all about can you stick the landing of a novella, and he really can. Like, he can do novels and he can do novellas, and that is a very impressive feat in itself to ask of an author. So going swiftly on to the next question, a book that made you happy this year. This is without a doubt Barbara Pym with her novel Some Tame Gazelle. This is about two kind of 50-year-old sisters. They're called Harriet and Belinda. They've stayed in this one village in England their entire life. They've never married. Their days revolve around what they're having for lunch, the village gossip, the church comings and goings, their respective romantic interests. Belinda is the quieter sister, and she has had about a 30-year unrequited love for the local archdeacon, who is now married. Meanwhile, Harriet, her kind of bubbly, extroverted sister, goes from one marriage proposal to another, turning them down every time, and whilst also kind of pining after whichever poor local very young curate has entered the church. And, you know, she darns his socks and feeds him hot meals and kind of panders to him and, you know, fantasizes about him. So it's all very laugh out loud funny. My mum was actually here in Bali visiting me whilst I was reading this novel, and I would be laughing next to her as we were reading our books together, and I'd be rereading passages of this novel to her, just because it was that funny. What I like about Barbara Pym's novels is that she puts a sweet, innocent kind of candy coating over what are really deeply entrenched societal problems in English village life. The next question is new releases that you haven't read yet but want to, and for me, I have two for this. I have Olga Tokarczuk's The Impusium and There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak, both of which have been sent by the publisher, so that's great. I have my copies ready to go, but I'm not actually going to be reading them until September for Elif Shafak's, because I'm reading that with my book club that I host online, link in the description box below, and I also am reading The Impusium with my book club in November. So these two are being saved for then, just so that everybody in the group can get hold of the book for the time that we're going to be reading them. If you feel like you don't see me often enough on YouTube, on my coffee page, not only do I offer the online book club, but I also put out 2 extra videos every month on there. So if you feel like you need more Charlotte content and more book content, then you can always go and sign up over there for bonus content and the book club. Both of these authors are very well established and they're favourite authors of mine. In fact, I'm pretty sure you'll already know what these books are about, but I'll just mention briefly. The Olga Tokarczuk novel is kind of a riff on Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain. We're set in a Polish health resort and it's surrounded by forest, and there's this sense that there's someone or something in the forest looking and monitoring the comings and goings and the people at the health resort, and that's kind of the premise of that. And then Shafak's novel is basically this multi-timeline, multi-character epic, basically focusing on the myth of Gilgamesh, which is kind of, I believe, ancient Mesopotamia's version of the Odyssey, with Odysseus as our hero in the ancient Greece version, except I believe Gilgamesh is like 1,000 years older than the Odyssey. So, but it's interesting to see how Elif Shafak is going to weave that, because one of her timelines is contemporary. There's this little romance going on, which is very typical of an Elif Shafak novel, and so I am really looking forward to this. I am a classicist. I grew up on myths and went to school and we did Latin at my school and classics, and I did A-level classical civilization, so I spent a lot of time in the ancient Greek, ancient Rome world, learning about all of these heroes and myths, and so it's all going to be very nice for me to see ancient Mesopotamia's version that I have never even heard of, let alone studied. Next question is my most anticipated release for the second half of the year. This is Claire Chambers' Shy Creatures, out in November. Now, if Claire Chambers rings a bell to you, that's because she was nominated for the Women's Prize for her novel Small Pleasures. It was a very divisive book at the time. People either loved or hated it based on the ending, which was pretty catastrophic. I loved it. I thought it really raised it up as a novel and made it memorable. I think it would have kind of faded into the background and been nothing if it hadn't been for that really kind of knockout ending. So I thought it was great. I thought she had to do that to kind of elevate the novel. So what is Shy Creatures, this new novel, about? This is set in, I believe, Croydon, 1964. And this is focusing on Helen, who's in her 30s. She's an art therapist, and it's basically this romance, very similar to Small Pleasures in that sense. She's having a long-term love affair with a married doctor, and one day they receive a phone call about a disturbance at a derelict house not far from where Helen lives. Inside the house, 2 people have been found. They're both alive, but clearly there's been signs of neglect happening here. So Shy Creatures is essentially meant to be a life-affirming novel on how we can all be confined in various ways and the joy of freedom. So I think this is going to be a very light novel. I think it will be perfect, as I say, to read this Claire Chambers novel, maybe a Barbara Pym novel, alongside Fire in November, just so the happiness of both of these novels can kind of outweigh the real sorrow and grief of what I imagine Fire is going to be by John Boyne. The next question is biggest disappointment of the year. This is definitely going to Sanjeev Sahotaa's The Spoiled Heart. This is his newest novel. His previous 2 novels I rated 4 stars each. I absolutely loved them, but this one just did not get off the ground for me. I think I made it to about the 50% mark, and it just, Sahotaa's writing anyways on the dry side. It's not fluffy, it's not lyrical at all, and normally I'm fine with that, but this just didn't have anything else going for it. Normally there's a character or a plot or a hook to keep you interested, and the blurb of this says that this is centering around some sort of political feud between 2 not politicians, but sort of political rivalry between this man and woman. And that for the most part does not happen. It's the sense of plot is very thin. There's nothing really to sink your teeth into there. Certainly no political rivalry. Whether that kicks in the second half, who knows, but it certainly wasn't there for what I read. There are a lot of conversations and side characters and things that seemingly don't go anywhere, and so this whole piece seems to lack direction. I think that's what I wanted from it. I wanted focus, I wanted direction, and it didn't have any. It doesn't quite know who it is, what it wants to do, or where it's going, and ultimately I think that makes it a failure as a novel. Hopefully this is just a blip for Sahotaa, and I'll be back on the Sahotaa loving bandwagon for his next novel, because as I say, his previous 2 novels, The Year of the Runaways and China Room, were 2 of my favourite novels in the respective years that I read them. So yeah, I'm hoping that this is just a blip. The next question is biggest surprise. This is definitely Wellness by Nathan Hill. We read this for May Book Club. It's 600 pages long, and it is focusing on one marriage, but it has a lot of subplot within that, focusing on their ancestors, the dodgy dealings of their ancestors, the health and wellness community, everything from wellness culture to Facebook algorithms. I personally like the narrative style of stories within stories. I think it really works, especially within such a huge novel where each tangent gets about 100 pages each, so it really feels fleshed out and you can get immersed into it before moving on to the next story. It's been a while since I've actually enjoyed the reading experience of a novel as much as I did this one. It was so compelling right from the start, where we start off meeting these characters in a very meet cute type scenario where they have apartments opposite each other in an apartment building in, I believe, Chicago, Illinois, and they are viewing each other, not realizing that they are both kind of falling in love at the same time. He is seeing this woman in her apartment, wanting to get to know her, and she is seeing him in his apartment, wanting to know more about him. They then meet and get married, and the story goes from there. The next question is favourite new to me author. This is definitely Hari Kunzru with Blue Ruin. This was a fantastic novel. I got this as an e-arc from NetGalley, and I just requested it actually on a whim because it reminded me so much of the premise of Second Place by Rachel Cusk, which is one of my favourite novels when I read it. An artist turns up at the country estate of one of his former flames and basically seeks asylum, but not in terms of he's turned up with his car and all of his stuff in the back of his car. It's COVID, he has nowhere to stay, but he can't really check in anywhere else, so he wants to hunker down during the pandemic, basically, in an abandoned hut on her land, and that's what he does. So she doesn't tell her husband, and things kind of go from there. And it is a really nice meditative novel because he is flashbacking to their life when they were together in their young 20s as artists in London to his reality now, and the day-to-day smallness of life, being cocooned up in this forest on this estate in a hut, and it's just so wonderful, very, very quiet and contemplative. So I really, really loved it. It felt like a dream, and I think one of the last lines actually says something like that. Yeah, the last line I'm reading here says, "As I drove, the place I had left, the little house with the wisteria over the door, the lake, the endless green canopy of trees, began to seem insubstantial, a vision, a bubble, and the time I had spent there no more than a dream." And that literally is how the book makes you feel. So I had another great experience reading this book. I was thoroughly impressed by it, and I really hope you guys pick it up on the back of this recommendation. The next question is most beautiful book. I'm going to say for this The Burial Plot by Elizabeth McNeill. I just love the colours on this front cover, the detail. It's screaming UK historical fiction, and that's exactly what it is. So yeah, I think this one without a shadow of a doubt. None of the other book covers that I've read this year have been that appealing. So but the content inside is what's the most important, I guess. The next question is also fairly difficult to answer. This is favourite fictional character, and I don't really fall in love or have particular attachments to characters, I don't think. This could be several, I guess. Obviously Gogol Ganguly that I mentioned is the main character in The Namesake. I also really liked Katerina, who is the main character in Kairos, but I'm also currently reading Robin Hobb's Ship of Magic, the first in the Life Ship Trader trilogy, and I'm really enjoying Althea. I'm about 60% of the way through that novel, so I've actually spent a very long time with her, and I'm just really loving her kind of spicy, spunky kind of personality, where she is not letting the men in her life rule her life, and she's very fiery and young and fiercely independent, and I just like that whole vibe that she's giving off. So it could be Althea, to be honest, but I would struggle to pick a favourite fictional character. Book that made you cry is definitely Jente Postema's What I'd Rather Not Think About, which was eligible and was shortlisted actually for the International Booker 2024 prize. This was the biggest surprise, I would say, from that long list this year. I really, really enjoyed this one. Aside from Kairos, this was the one that I enjoyed the most. And it is, as I'm sure you're all aware, and I'll link in the description box as well, my video where I spoke about this one more fully, but this is the one where we're centering on a set of twins, and the boy kills himself, and it's basically about the other twin grappling with how she's supposed to live and move on now that he's gone, and it's told in a series of vignettes, and they're looking back at their childhood and as well as early adulthood, and it's that whole thing. It's really wonderful. If you have a sibling, I have a sibling, I wouldn't be too worried about going into it. It wasn't kind of triggering or anything like that sort of thing, so it was beautiful. It really is a beautifully written ode to the brother-sister relationship, and I thoroughly recommend you check it out. It's wonderful. most read author of 2023, this is so far Ian Reid. I read Foe by him and also We Spread. We Spread was such a meh novel. It was set in a care home, and it was such a disappointment after having loved Foe and gave Foe 5 stars for this to be the next book by Ian Reid that I read, to the point where I'm going to kind of put him off now and not read any more of his work unless it's really calling to me, because yeah, We Spread was such a letdown after loving Foe. So the final question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? Now, I don't have a yearly TBR necessarily. There are no books that I need to read by the end of the year. I do have a general flow and plan for each month kind of thing, certainly the next couple of months. So August I will be reading women in translation novels and also booker novels. September I'll be reading kind of booker novels as well, I'm sure, as well as reading by whim during those 2 months, because I need some sort of palate cleansers after what I imagine to be quite heavy literary fiction coming from the book along list. So that's my plan, but in terms of what those books are going to be and what that's all going to look like, I don't know. I don't plan really at all. Like, my October, November, December reading is not planned whatsoever. Aside from the books that I've chosen for my online book club, we have July, August, September, October and November's chosen. I just need to decide what we're reading in December. So yes, as I say, my memberships and everything like that is linked down below, so you can check that out if you would like more content or if you would like to join the online book club. This month we're reading John Boyne's A Ladder to the Sky. August we are reading A Booker Book, so that will be decided for us by the judges at the end of this month. I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. My first mid-year freakout book tag. Make sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and I shall see you very soon in my next video, guys. Thanks for watching.